idea on REST APIs, okay, then it will be very easy for you to understand the GraphQL. Okay, so what is GraphQL? GraphQL stands for Graph Query Language, and it was developed by Facebook, and it is an open source data query and manipulation language. Okay, we'll come to it. I mean, we have the whole practical setup. Okay, we will run the queries and we'll find out like how the query and manipulation or mutation happens. Okay, so no worry about it. This is a bit of theory. We'll cover the theory in 5-10 minutes, and then we'll directly jump into the practical session. Okay, so yeah, it is just like the SQL. Okay, if you compare the SQL queries, okay, so if you're trying to do select star from student, okay, this is sort of a our REST API call. Okay, you will get everything in your JSON response, but with the help of GraphQL, we will give the liberty to the consumer that he can fetch only the certain attributes of the response. Okay, whatever he wants, he will fire that query, and that will only he will get. He will not get the huge response, and then he has to traverse the whole JSON response and then get the data out of it. Okay, so this is actually very helpful from the consumer side, and also there are a lot of logic which we are writing, okay, in our application code, that will unnecessarily keep on getting executed, and it will try to populate the whole JSON even though consumer doesn't want it. Okay, so GraphQL gives you the liberty to execute response which the consumer is expecting. Okay, so in the REST APIs, we have this get, put, post, and delete, right? All the HTTP methods. In the GraphQL, we have two concepts, just two. One is query, which is actually used to get the data, and other one is mutation. It will actually use to update, alter, and all certain stuff which is actually post, put, and delete are doing. Okay, so yeah, again, just like the REST APIs, you can write GraphQL into multiple. It's kind of language independent, right? It's REST is also language independent. You can write, you can consume anything, and you can write your uh, producer in anything, right? So in any language. So it's the same concept applies for GraphQL also. So basically, it is built on top of REST APIs only. I mean, it is actually bit more performant. Okay, that's the only thing. So GraphQL query, it is you. Yeah, so we have this three important concepts with the GraphQL. Okay, one is GraphQL query. Okay, I have not started the recording. Have you started the recording for it, Sunu?
Yeah,
Okay, sure, sure. Thanks. So we have this GraphQL query. Okay, this is actually used to fetch the data. Okay, which we have already discussed. You can compare it with our get REST APIs. Okay, so any class which is implementing this interface, GraphQL query resolver. Okay, so that become our that become our base for taking all the endpoints for the get. Okay, so any get request will come to that particular class component. You can say it is acting as a REST controller class. Okay, which is accepting all the get requests. Okay, and for mutation, yeah, it is used to, as we have already discussed, it is used to alter the data, create, update, and delete. You can compare it with post, put, delete REST APIs, and any class which is implementing this GraphQL mutation resolver interface, that will becomes kind of a REST controller for all the alteration of that particular data. Okay, then we have this GraphQL schema. This is very important. Okay, this is the base of the GraphQL. Okay, so we have as we have already discussed, we will provide the flexibility to the consumer that which attributes they want in response. Okay, so in this contract we will there is a consumer and provider. Okay, they will agree to some contract. Okay, that provider will say that okay, you can pass out only these certain fields in your request. Okay, and the consumer will out of that particular contract, he can also alter that. I mean, he can just change the number of attributes he wants in actual response, but he cannot alter that contract. I mean, the contract will remain the same. We'll get back to it when we actually deep dive into our code. Okay, So it's currently just understand that it is the base of our GraphQL. Okay, it actually determines the contract between the consumer and provider. Okay, that's how we can get and alter the data of our application. So schema is a collection of GraphQL types. Okay, you will have uh, just sort of a type scripting if you have learned, right? So it will so this you will have define it like type query. And I mean, again, this is from our application code base, so we'll get back to it and we'll understand it, like how to create the schema file and all. Okay, just have an idea that this is how our schema file looks like. Okay, it will have some sort of a method and return type. And if somebody has worked on gRPC, they will also understand it. Okay, this is how we will define the input and the attributes and the type of those attributes. Nothing much fancy. Okay, so yeah, what's the difference between GraphQL and the REST API? REST is having the fixed response, okay, fixed JSON response, while the GraphQL provides the flexibility to the consumer that which attributes they want in response. Again, we can take the example of SQL. And what was the disadvantage with the REST APIs? There were overfetching and underfetching happens with the help with the REST API, but that will not happen from the GraphQL perspective. Okay, whatever consumer wants, he will just fire that query only, and he will get only that particular response which he actually needs. Okay, so in later point of time, he doesn't want some data. If he want to add some data, he can add it. He can change the GraphQL query, and he can fetch the data. But there will never be overfetching of data happen or underfetching of data happen, okay, in GraphQL. So REST has again, we have already discussed REST has different HTTP methods. There is separate endpoints for each API. Okay, yeah. So we already know, right? We in REST APIs we will write a lot of REST controllers, like for slash products, for slash orders. We'll have different REST controllers. But here in GraphQL, we will have just one query file, and there is one mutation file. Okay, I mean that class which is actually implementing those two interfaces which I've already discussed, the GraphQL query resolver, and they are the basic endpoints for all your there's only one endpoint for getting all the get requests. There's one endpoint, mutation and class, which takes your all the request of put, update, and delete. So GraphQL needs schema file while the rest does not need it. Okay, why we need the schema file? Because this is a contract between the provider and consumer. Okay, by the help of that only, the consumer knows, okay, these are the information which the provider is giving me. Okay, I can fetch only this much data. Okay, so this is kind of a sample. Okay, while firing any query. So this is how our application, when we make our application up, okay, student service application up. So this is a kind of we are sending the query. Okay, this query is like a get request. Okay, and here we are trying to send the student ID 1. Okay, we want the response of the student ID 1. Okay, and what all we want in the response, we want just the first name, last name, and city. There could be multiple attributes in the model here, but we want just these three fields. And then if we send the request, we'll get the response of that particular ID, and we will get only these three fields. There could be multiple 1000 columns of the student, but we are fetching just the response which the consumer actually providing it here. Okay, so there is no extra overfetching of the data happening here. Okay, then the GraphQL resolver. Okay, yeah. So again, we'll get back to one more point. Okay, where here also you are say suppose I will just take that example. So GraphQL resolve. Okay, so if you see here, there is one attribute called learning objects. Okay, and if I pass here all, so there are a lot of learning objects coming in. Okay, and in future, if I come to that one requirement that I would just want to fetch just the Java learning object of that student. So with the help of GraphQL, I can achieve that. Okay, I can just change the filter logic here. Okay, and it will just send me that particular learning object. Okay, So we'll come to this point when we discuss the deep dive into the code. Okay. Now, actually, the time has come that we will start working on the code. Okay. So these are all the concepts. So far it is clear. So this is our student or node, and we have this our subject node. We can have on the top of this. So usually what will happen in the REST call, so it will try to fetch all the subjects and populate into our response, JSON response. But with the help of GraphQL resolver, okay, we can actually uh, filter down further in the response that which actual value we want. Okay. Like we have just seen here, like I just want the learning object of the Java, and I can further down filter it. Okay. Yeah. So far, any doubts here in the theoretical concepts? Okay, I will take that as no. Okay, I will move on. So yeah, so this is our application. Okay, so if you have worked on REST APIs, so you might have seen this at the rate component scan, at the rate entity scan, and enable JP repository. So these are some of the annotations. I mean, you will write on top of. When you have this Spring Boot application, you will just write on top of it so that you can run your application from here. Okay. So these are the component scans. So these whatever the namespace which you provide here, whatever the package information you said, you define here, all the components, all the classes that will be available inside our Spring container. Okay, so it will scan down to all the packages. Okay, and this is entity scan and JP repository. This is helpful for getting the data from the DB. Okay, so first, before starting application, let's check the DB side. Okay, this is of my SQL workbench. So we have this. Okay, we have this student subject and address. Okay, so in our student, if you see, we have this ID, first name, last name, email, and there is an address ID. So one student will have one address, and one student will have multiple subjects. So there is a mapping table which also gets created. I'm not sure, it's not been seen here, but yeah, you will get to know here when I will. Okay, yeah. So yeah, so whatever information which we have seen here, right, tables. So these are the entities. Okay, address, and this is our student. Okay, this is our student. Okay, we have this ID. This is all JP repository. This is nothing to do with the GraphQL. Okay, so I hope you have an idea about it. So this is our kind of way of creating the entities. Okay, in the DB. Okay, so you have this. You will define it like at the rate entity and the table student. Okay, so that gets created here. Okay, and you have different attributes, ID, and blah blah stuff. And then yeah, there is a one, every student will have one single address. Okay, so there is a one-to-one mapping, but one student can have multiple learning subjects. Okay, so there is a one-to-many mapping. So that's how you will define in your JPA. Okay, classes. So entity classes. Fine. So once we are clear with that, now we'll move to this our query class. Okay, so yeah, I was mentioning, right, so this is our REST controller for taking all the GET requests. Okay, so and how do you define it, and I will also show you the schema files. Okay, and this is our schema file. This is actually helpful in defining what I mean, this is a kind of a contract which we discussed, right? This is a contract between your uh, I mean, the consumer as well as the provider. Okay, so as of now, this application is my provider class. Okay, so and this provider, I have to define the schema. Okay, so first take a very simple hello world sort of a thing. Okay, so I'm just defining here public string first query and return first query. Okay, and this has to be accessed um, from outside, from our postman. So how you will define? Okay, so for this you have to define your schema inside your query.graph QLS file. Okay, you will type, you will just define here type query, and just ignore as of now, just focus on this. Okay, so this is our function name. Okay, here, if you see here, so this is our function which we want to invoke from outside. Okay, so you will define here our function name, and if there are any other attributes, you will define it like this. Okay, and this is our return. Okay, so if I have defined this in type of query. Okay, and if I make our application up, and then I will try to hit from the postman. Okay, so this is how I can hit it from the postman. So this you can assume that this is our consumer. Okay, which is actually trying to hit our provider application. Okay, there is some data in our provider application. If I hit this endpoint, it should give me the response, which is we are returning here first query.
Sorry to interrupt, Akshay. I just have a question. So can you please like go to the postman?
Okay.
I just wanted to know like how did you get this graph for variables and the query stuff like as in, like
Yeah.
when we open?
Sure. Okay, I will go to that point. Okay, if you click on this body, right, in the postman, you will find a lot of stuff here. Usually we will send it in raw and JSON. Here we'll set, right, but here for GraphQL you have to just select the GraphQL, and here you can fire your queries. Sorry, I missed that point telling. Okay, now is it clear? This is how you can run it from postman.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, we have reached to this point. Yeah. So this is our consumer application. Okay, I have started my provider application. I have defined this class, query class, in our provider application. It is implementing the GraphQL query resolver. Okay, and I have just defined this function, and I have to access this function from the consumer, outside the consumer world. Okay, so for that I have defined it into this schema. Okay, I have just defined this type query, and first query and string, it is returning the string response back. Okay, so in the consumer side, I have to when I'm firing any query, I have to define it like query. If it is a mutation, I have to define it mutation. But yeah, currently we are just firing the get query, so you have to just mention query, and in the curly brace, which function you are trying to call. Okay, currently there is no attributes here. I mean, there is no parameters which this function is accepting. We will come to that point where we'll have another example. Okay, so currently this is where it's kind of a hello world of GraphQL. Okay, you will just write the first query and you will just hit the send. Okay, it will actually reach to our provider layer, and it will see is there any first query uh, exist here, and it will map to this method and it will return the response. Any doubts so far? I mean, this is kind of a hello world for the GraphQL world. Okay, so yeah, so let's see another example. I write another example in my query. I'm just want a second query. So how do I define it in my schema file? It's just the same way. You could just keep on adding here second query string. If I come here, I will try to hit the second query. It will give me the response back. Then we'll come to a little complex example where this is accepting a request model. Okay, this one, right? This is accepting the sample request model, and in the sample request, if you see, we have first name and last name. Okay, so now how do we define it in our schema file? We have defined this function here, and it is actually returning sample request dot whatever we pass in first name and last name. It is just returning that response. How do we define it in our schema file first? So in schema file, we come here, and this is the full name, this is the function name, and it is accepting the sample request, which is of type sample request. I mean, this is the attribute, and this is the response string. It is returning string. And for sample request, we have to define it like this. This is the input sample request and first name. So if I am defining exclamation mark with any type, that means it cannot be null. it has to be passed from the consumer side. Okay, this can be null, first name and last. So if I go back here and if I try to, if I make my application provider application up and if I try to hit it from Postman, so this is the way how I will be sending from the consumer side. This is a query, which is my function is send dot get, and Smith. Okay, if I send hit, it will give you the full name. It is trying to fetch the full name for it. Okay, so far we have not touched the student stuff. Okay, so now we'll start. If the basics are clear, then we will go ahead with the student our application which we have written.
One question, sir.
Yeah.
So can you go to the Postman? So here we have student service. So how does student service is linked with the query?
Yeah. Sorry, I again forgot. So usually by default it is graph. If you are not mentioning any servlet mapping, okay. So by default it is GraphQL. Okay. So you can actually, if I'm not mentioning this thing, if I comment it out, you can, if you make your provider application up, you can mention here GraphQL and you can run all the queries here. But if you want some specific URL that needs to be hit, you have to mention like this GraphQL servlet mapping.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And all the requests are going to be post, right?
No. I mean, if you are mentioning it in query, like I will tell you, in query also, these requests are post because there is no get in front of any method. Okay. But if I'm mentioning get here, that means it has to be of get nature. Okay. I will get back to you on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I feel it should be get, but yeah, I mean, it is also post. I'm sorry. This is also post. Again, yeah, let me hit it. Yeah. So yeah, I feel every request is post only. There is no get here. Okay. So
Okay.
yeah, thanks for asking this question.
Thank you.
Cool. So yeah, we're here. Okay, and this is now we'll go back to our student application. Okay, and where what we want is if somebody is passing this ID. Okay, so we have all the different students. Okay, ID 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Okay, I want the response for ID 1 only. Okay, so this is just the same rest also. We will have that path param or something. Okay, you can pass it in query param also. So it is accepting the ID and it is just trying to fetch the same thing from the repository. Everything is same as the rest. But for this one, you have to define for GraphQL, you have to define this into your schema. Okay. So in schema, I come here and this I can, if that was get student, but I can write it student, but GraphQL will automatically map it. Okay. So you no need to worry. You can also mention to it to a get student also, but it will automatically map it. Okay. So this is student and this is ID. Okay. Uh, this is accepting ID in int, and we have this student response. Okay. So in the student response, what we are returning back is we have returning back ID, first name, last name, email, street, city, and what are the learning subjects for that particular student. Okay. And yeah, that I'm defining it in. Okay, that I'm defining it in my student type, student response type. Okay, all these fields. And then this learning subject, yeah, I will come to this point. Okay, this filter logic, we will have it, we'll discuss it later. Okay, so for now, just focus on that. This is the way to define the type of student response, and it is, yeah, here it is also yeah. So this is subject response. Okay, you have to define if you are mentioning it, it is returning the subject response. So what all response it is returning here in the postman. See, ID, subject name, or marks obtained. So these things you are defining it here. And yeah, I will come back to this filter logic. Okay. So for now, yeah. So you want a particular ID response only. Okay. So that ID, instead of hard coding it here, you can also hard code that particular value here and it will return you that response. Okay. But instead of hard coding that, you can define it into your GraphQL variables. Okay. So this variable, if you define like if I want the student ID 1, okay, you just change the GraphQL variable and it is the same query which will be fired. Okay. So discussing about this query, we already know, right? This is our method name. Okay. And this is our if there is any attributes which we are passing here, it has to be defined like this. Okay. But in case if you are using any GraphQL variables, you have to define their type before this function. Okay, call. So this is the kind of defining the variable types here. Okay, you can use the same student here, and what all variables it is accepting. It is accepting IDD, which is int, and we'll come back to this filter logic. Okay, so this is for filtering logic. We have defined it here, and yeah. So so far so clear. I mean, this is the way we can define any variable here, and that can be passed into your query. Okay. Guys, are you guys following so far? Just wanted to
Yes.
check.
Actually,
Yeah,
one
yes.
small question.
Yeah.
So let's say we have same type as input and output. Can you please go to the template? I mean the query template. Yeah, here. So we have sample request as input, right? Let's say we have similar output type.
Yes,
So
yes. Then you have to define
we have to define it as both input as well as type, right?
as well as
Twice.
type. Yes, yes. We have to define. If there is any another model for it, then you have to define like type. This.
Got
You can,
Got it. Thank you, Akshay.
so yeah, I have to define the variable type here, and this is my function call, and this is my response. Okay, I can also alter the response attributes which I actually want in my consumer side. Okay, so currently I have this response. What all these are all things will be returned from my provider. Okay, but consumer later point of time decided I don't want city street, so he can just remove it. Okay, and I will just remove it and we'll see. I'm not getting any city or that stuff. Okay, so this is the magic with GraphQL. Okay, whatever consumer wants, he will write it in that query, and that only on that basis the response will be generated. Okay, if he doesn't pass this learning object, this learning object will also go from here. Okay, yeah. So far so clear. I mean, if we are passing one, if I want to get suppose second student ID from my backend application. Yeah. So this is returning just the second student ID response. Okay. And one more thing. Yeah. So this full name you are seeing here, right? It is not part of student response. Are you seeing this? It is not a part of student response. So this is kind of, we can call it as a transient attribute. We are not persisting it anywhere in our model, but we can populate it in our application, and we can have it, I mean, open for consumer to access this information. So yeah. So here we are populating, I guess, the full name for it. I mean, we are just getting the first name and last name, and we are populating it, and our consumer is able to fetch the value for it. Okay, full name. Okay, so far so clear, right? So now we'll come to the logic for filtering. Okay, yeah. So so far we have defined everything, yeah, in the query. Okay, we'll come back to mutation after that, and then we have one important concept of filtering the response. Okay, filtering. So we have this query, and then we have this response resolver. Okay, so this is what it is doing. Okay, this is GraphQL resolver. You can resolve the response of the entity based upon filters or some other conditions. Okay, now we are all aware that the consumer may or may not send few attributes, and based upon that, a response is generating. But what if here he wants learning subjects, but he wants to filter down the learning subjects further? He wants just Java. He doesn't want .NET, PHP, and other subjects which we are showing it into response, right? So for that, we can add further filtration logic on top of the response. Okay, so we can define it, we can define it in our student response resolver. Okay, so for that, it is implementing this GraphQL resolver. Okay, so far we have understood that we have these three important interfaces. One is GraphQL query resolver, which is writing for our query class. This is GraphQL mutation resolver. This is for writing our mutation class. And then we have this GraphQL resolver, which is to further filtering the response which we have gotten the JSON. Okay, so our objective was we have to filter it down, and if the user passes Java here, it has to send the response of Java only. Should not send the response for all the subjects. Okay, so if I have not written this logic here, I would have returned this logic in student response. Okay, like this. Okay, I'm getting the student, and from student, if the response is getting generated, we are getting all the learning subjects, and this is how without filtration without filtration of the response would have given the result back. Okay, but yeah, if I have to further filter it down, I have to remove the logic from here. Okay, I can comment it down, and I will write that get learning subject okay method here, and it is actually taking this subject name filter. This is the filter or condition on which I want to further filter down my response. Okay, if the student, so the student response will have all the learning subjects. Okay, we from student response, okay, there is one more important thing. So here you see I have to write the student here, because I wanted in my resolver to fetch the learning objects. Okay, so you can add this here, but no need to write it in our query GraphQL file. Okay, so if you have not defining it into your GraphQL, your consumer will never be able to fetch that student. Okay, so you can define it here. Okay, this private, and you can see, right? This is for, you can also put a comment here. Don't put it in schema. Okay, this is just for further filtering down the logic. Okay, we have defined here student, and so student respond.get student.get learning subjects, and if the consumer is passing all, we will just keep on adding all the learning subjects. If the consumer is passing a particular Java, we are just add it for that particular response, and we are just returning it back. Now let's test it out. Okay, sorry, I just have to show you the query, how to define it in query. Okay, so for learning subjects, okay, and if you have defined it here, this is get learning subjects. You can just define it sort of learning subjects. It will automatically map to this particular resolver. Okay, but it has to follow the same format. Okay, get learning subjects, it has to be exactly the same. Okay, so it will map to that. No need to pass the response here. It will automatically understand that it needs that response. Okay, just pass the filter here, filter name. Okay, no need to pass the student response, just pass the filter. It will automatically understand that it needs on basis of on the response only, if it is it will try to apply the filter, right? So yeah, just pass the filter here and you will get the subject response here, array of subject response. This is array thing, okay? And yeah, this is my subject response. And yeah, so this for this particular filter, I have defined a few enums here. We have this all Java, MySQL, and MongoDB. And so that means these are the enums that our I mean, as of now, I have defined it in my model, but once I define it in my schema, it will be exposed outside for accessing for the consumer also. Okay, I have to define here all Java MySQL. In case if I remove this, my consumer will never be able to pass MySQL. It will give me an error. You have to define all. I mean, you can further filter it down on your schema basis. It's all up to you. Okay. So yeah, so if I define my subject name filter here, and if I pass subject name filter, so there is a filtration on top of learning subjects will happen. Okay, I will just run it here. So first I will pass all. Okay, that means it will give all the learning subjects for that particular student. Okay, Java, MySQL, MongoDB. If I pass here Java, it will further filter down the response. Okay, it is just giving me the Java response. And one more thing, one more very important thing. If I don't want this learning subject, right, this method, it will never ever execute it. So that's how we are saving a lot of I mean, GraphQL is very performance efficient. Okay, if the consumer is not, if he doesn't want the learning subjects, this resolver automatically will never get executed. But that will not happen in the case of REST APIs, because in the REST APIs, everything, every logic will get executed, your whole JSON response will get built and all. Okay, but this is the advantage of using GraphQL.
Akshay, small question.
Yeah.
I didn't understand how get learning from here, get learning subjects and learning subjects are mapped. Can you repeat that part?
Yeah. So let me first tell you how full name and wait. If I think if this gets clear automatically, yeah. So I was discussing, right? Get student. Okay, you can actually map. You can just write it here as a student. Automatically, GraphQL will determine is there any get student method defined in our query file or not. It will. This is our REST controller for all the GET requests, right? So it will try to find is there any student method, or if there is any get student method here. Both it will try to find. It is seeing the student, it will return you the student. The same happens with the resolver class also. Okay, so if you have defined here learning subjects, okay, in the response you have defined it, right? So in the response resolver, or this, yeah, student response resolver, it will try to find this method learning subjects. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, you were saying it's complete. It is taken completely automatically by GraphQL itself.
Yeah. It's a GraphQL feature. You don't have to worry about it. Either it will just try to find out the learning subjects method, or it will find out if there is any method which is having get in front of it, get learning subjects. It has to be defined exactly same. If I define 1, 2, 3, it will not work. I mean, after if I define here 1, 2, 3, then it will stop working. It will give you error.
Okay,
400 something. Okay.
thanks.
Okay.
Actually, I have a doubt here.
Yeah.
Would you go to query.graphql file?
Yeah.
How does the Spring Boot application knows that it has to search for student or get student method in the query.java file from this GraphQL file? I mean, how does?
You're seeing this type here, right?
Okay, so we don't have to. I mean, intimate that query.java has to look in query.graphql, right?
No. So if you are defining type query and if you're defining anything here, it will automatically go to your query because you are implementing that interface here, right? You are implementing this interface
Okay.
resolver. So automatically GraphQL will know that it has to search it here in this class only, whichever is implementing this GraphQL resolver.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
So if we are clear with our query, we'll move to mutation. Guys, till now, any doubts?
No, from my side.
So yeah, so far we have just seen like how to fetch the data, get the data, okay, and we are seeing how consumer can change the query and he will get the response whatever he wants, okay, the way he wants. Now coming back to the mutation. Mutation is like updating or adding something, okay, so altering the data in your backend, okay. So for mutation, we have this class, okay. You have to implement it with GraphQL mutation resolver, okay. Then you have this student service. It's just similar to our REST, okay. The way you are trying to create a student in REST, it is exactly the same logic, okay. What we are doing here, it is taking the student request, it is trying to populate the student model, trying to populate the address model, and other stuff like subject list and all. And after that, we are just saving everything in the repository. We are saving it, address repository, student repository. Okay, this is all the REST thing. This is nothing to do with the GraphQL. Okay, so where the GraphQL comes into the picture, any mutation, any alteration, you have to implement it GraphQL mutation resolver. Okay, now how do you define it? And for mutation, you have to write a different schema for it, and that has to start with mutation.graphqls. Just like query, you have to define type query, you have to define type mutation here. Okay, this is taking the create student, and yeah, it is taking the create student request of this type. Everything is same, right? Similar. And one more thing, if you have defined the student response in query.graphql, no need to define it again in mutation GraphQL. It will automatically picks it up. This is what the feature of GraphQL. Okay, no need to define if it is already defined it in GraphQL. If you define, it will not throw any error, but yeah, no need to define. Okay, so this is our input, create student request. It is taking the first name, email, and all those stuff. Okay, and yeah, it is taking an array of create student request. So you can pass an array in the subjects learning. Okay, so if I have defined my mutation class here, as well as I have defined my mutation.graphql file here, then if I make my application up, I can fire the query from Postman. Okay, so just like our query, we are starting it with query. Here for mutation, we have to start it with mutation. And this, I will come back to this one. Okay, this is our function which we want to call, and it is accepting the create student request. Now again, like how I want to pass this create student request, that I can define it in my GraphQL variable. So GraphQL variable is actually that request body in the REST API call, we pass it in the request body. Now we are just passing it into GraphQL variable. Okay, it is exactly the same JSON which we want to persist. Nothing new here. Okay, we have subject learnings which is the array of subjects. Okay, now yeah, so if you are passing anything in GraphQL, you have to define the type of it. This is how I will define the type for that. And this is my method signature which I want to call in the mutation class, and this is my response which I want from the provider, which all values which I want to get populated in my response. Okay, so again, if I try to remove email and street here, it will not show me the email and street here if I send it back. Yeah, so there is a new student gets created with an ID. Earlier you were saying that ID was 7, now it is changed to 9. So that means it has persisted this new data into our DB. Okay, and I will show it. Yeah, you're seeing this 9, right? Yeah. So it has persisted the data, and again, you can also again have that filtration logic here. You can send it in the GraphQL, or you can even change it here also if you want Java only. Yeah, it is returning just the Java. Okay, so guys, I think we are done with mutation also. So far, any doubts here? So internally, everything which we do in the REST calls, right, for creating any new student object, everything will happen the same way. But for GraphQL, you have to just define your mutation which implements this. You have to define this method signature in your mutation.graphqls file, and then you can start accessing it from the Postman, your service API. Okay, guys, we have discussed the whole application here. Okay, so I will share I have actually already shared the Udemy link. I mean, you can also download this application from there. Okay. Yeah, so we are done with this now. We have this client also. Okay, one more client application. Okay, so whatever we are passing it here, right, we can also pass it from our REST API or client also. Okay, there is actually, we can make our client up like that's what happens in REST also, right? We have this client, REST web client or something. It will invoke our provider, which we have written the logic here for REST controllers and all. So that can be same happen with GraphQL also. So this is our GraphQL client, okay, application. So here, if I want to get particular ID, okay, so if you see in the client service, we are just building exactly the same query string which I have defined it here. Okay, this is exactly the same. Everything is same, and the way you have to pass variables is it has to be in map. Okay. The way the variables we are passing it has to be in map. You can define map here, and you want the ID 1 here or 2 here. That query string is getting defined, and then there is a GraphQL request builder. It takes the query, it takes the variables, and it will build your request, something like this. And then you can hit GraphQL web client, do post request block. So we are doing a post request, and we have this defined in GraphQL client URL. We have defined it here. So this will automatically, my application is already up in localhost 8080. It will automatically hit this student service. Okay, so any doubt till here, like how to write a GraphQL web client? Guys, are you following up? Okay.
No doubts.
Okay, sure. It's simple, right? If we have already defined that query here, and the same thing we are defining it in our GraphQL client also. Okay, then yeah, if you want to create a mutation call, so this is how we can have the mutation call. Have mutation create student. Everything is same. We have already discussed it. You are building this query. You are sending it. I mean, you are creating this request. You are building that query, mutation query here, and what all variables you are passing anything, right? Currently you are passing GraphQL variables, this student create student request JSON. Okay, so that model you have to pass it here. Okay, and yeah, it is returning back the student response. So I will just run it here. I think by this we are almost done with our GraphQL presentation. Where is it? Yeah. So this is my GraphQL client. Okay. If I want to fetch get to, internally it will create this query logic and everything, and it will give you the response back. Okay. And if you want to change that logic and all, you can change the logic here. Okay. And yeah, so this is my GraphQL client which wants to create a new student. So this is exactly the same REST call. In the request body, I'm just sending this create student request, and it will internally map to this mutation call, and it will create a new student for me. See, new student gets created. Yeah, guys, I think we are almost done. This is what I want to share for GraphQL. You guys have any doubt? This application is already present in Udemy. If you want, I can share it again, the Udemy link. You can also make your server up and try different things out. Okay, you can just keep on changing the schema, keep on changing the request here, keep on changing the response here. If you want just few response stuff. If I remove everything, it will just give me these 3 fields. Okay. Okay, there is some, it looks like some validation error happened because maybe it needs some more details. Okay, so yeah, I mean, depending upon the way we are handling the errors and all, currently maybe few things we are not handling, but yeah, if you want to remove this, we have already seen, right? If I remove the city here, and it will remove the city from the response. Okay. Yeah, that's it, guys, from GraphQL perspective. I hope you guys have understood something.
Definitely, Akshay. Thank you so much.
A
Thank
small question, Akshay.
Yeah,
Why
Chintan.
everyone choose REST on GraphQL? Because it gives more flexibility, right? Why everyone will choose REST after seeing this customization and automation also? What makes GraphQL like little less when compared to REST?
Yeah, maybe it is currently new to the market. People have just started adopting it. Maybe they will come to know the more if it is more performance wise. So yeah, I mean that that's up to that how I mean the way the leads are architects wants to implement. But yeah, I mean REST is widely used, right? Everyone is using REST. So that could be, it is widely accepted. That could be the reason. I mean, it's just the same like people are using the Java and Python more. Why not some other language like Golang, which have more which have more performance compared to them. It's just like currently it may get accepted in future. I mean, adopted in future. But yeah, it's apparently new to the market, so that's why people are not using it.
Okay, thanks.
This is what I feel, but maybe there could be advantage of REST over GraphQL. We have to look into it. But I don't see like why people are not using GraphQL, but it completely yeah, that one thing which I feel could be an issue, like we have to define the proper contract. Okay. So the advantage with REST gives you that there is no contract, there is no definite there is a model which responds, which is, but there is no sort of a contract that has to be defined. Like you are defining that schema and all, right? That is not required in REST. But again, I mean, I'm not very sure.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Sure, guys. Thanks all for joining. If we have no doubts, we can wind it up.